Today I'm going to be listening to a piece by Earl Brown. This is going to be our second Earl Brown episode. It's an orchestra piece called Cross Sections of Color Fields. It's from the 1970s. My mistake, cross sections and color fields. So yeah, this is the score. It looks like he worked on it over a period of 3 years, completing it in 1975. The instrumentation for the orchestra is 4-2-3, saxophone 3, 4-3-3-2, 6 percussionists, 2 harps, celesta, piano, and then strings. The suggested numberings for the strings are 16, 14, 10, 8, 6. And the percussionists mostly have, well, they're all on pitched percussion. And that's a timpanist, and then 5 percussionists on Glock, xylophone, vibes, marimba, and tubular bells. Some interesting things about the ensemble. I mean, we got the 4th flautist just dedicated to alto flute. The 2nd oboist is just on English horn. The 3rd clarinetist is just on bass. And soprano saxophone is an interesting addition to the winds. And the 3rd bassoonist is just on contra. I think it's also interesting that we have 2 tubas. This is probably the first score I've seen where there's 2 tubas. It looks like the seating plan is a little bit different here. And I guess the conductor is going to be cueing different members of the ensemble. So it's important that there's different visible cues, high center percussion, low center strings, left woodwinds, far left harp and piano, right brass, far right harp 2 and celesta. And I guess Earl Brown workshopped this piece to get it this way. For those of you who aren't familiar with Earl Brown's work, he's famous for his graphic scores and for his work with aleatoricism, basically. He's a student of John Cage, so he was a member of the New York school, you could say, along with Christian Wolff and Morton Feldman. I get into this a lot more on our previous episode about Earl Brown. The episode number is in the subtitle there. I also go over his biography briefly. And I did not look at this score beforehand, so I'm going to take a little bit of time getting to know the performance notes just to figure out how this thing works. So it looks like there are open form sections in this piece. That's usually where Earl Brown will dedicate a whole page of music to just positioning musical materials around the page, and then the performers can move freely from one music material to the other, whatever that may be. That's different from more controlled aleatory, where, for example, you get rid of bar lines and just have seconds indicated, right? That's sort of just typical, you give performers the note heads and larger proportions of time to work with. This score, interestingly, just has some strictly notated things, and then there's also something that Earl Brown calls proportional notation. So sections of more figurative material. I guess these are the more graphic portions of the score with less notehead things, less conventional staff notation stuff. He has some notes here on specific pages. Page 4, page 7, page 9, page 11, and then page 12 and 13 seem to be open form pages, so he details that a little bit. You can see that these notes range from very specific things asked of individual performers to just general comments on how to read the music. Page 23 is also open form. Yeah, I don't know if it's really worth our time to go um, over all of this. I think it'll become apparent once we start listening to the piece. As always, Earl Brown's program note is very academic and technical. Um, and the title, he always puts a lot of thought into his titles. They mean something deeply to him and his practice. He often borrows from the visual arts as well. So there's this idea of a color field. When I think of color field painting, I think of Mark Rothko. So here he's describing what that means and what that means for him musically. He's talking about how contemporary music is often considered busy and active and violent. Of course, he's talking about like modernist serial music. And he's trying to get away from that a little bit with this piece. Maybe there's some influence from Morton Feldman there, but it sounds like this is more meditative, or the pacing is somewhat slower. And and then even in the program note, he talks about the different types of notation that are in the score. You can see with the first, I guess you could say stanza or line of music, there's two really big cues from the conductor. The first one is 15 seconds long, and then the next one is more like 35 seconds long, but the performers have to sort of reach a certain dynamic within the first 5 seconds, and then the dynamics have a bit more variability. Yeah, and then on the second page we have like typical aleatoric stuff where you have repeated cells for spans of time. It's going to be very notey, as you can imagine, with like the 5 pitched percussionists and 2 harpists. And there's a piano too, right? Yeah, so it's like there's just going to be a lot of notes in this thing, a lot of huge chords, it looks like. So yeah, the Earl Brown Foundation website has a recording, and I think it's the full piece. Although in the score he lists it as between 17 and 20 seconds, or sorry, 17 and 20 minutes. This is 13. I think it's still the whole thing, but yeah. So I guess oddly enough, this will be the source of the recording for this one. Link is in the description, and I'll let you know what I think on the other side here. And yeah, if this is your first time listening to Earl Brown, just be aware that all of the sounds you're hearing can be slightly different from one performance to the next, and it's very loosely coordinated music. Okay, yeah, so this is a really cool score. I highly recommend looking at it if you have access to a music library. Even if you have to do an interlibrary loan, I think it's really worth just looking at the score. There's a lot of pages that are open form like this that give the conductor varying degrees of control, and it was really cool to see what the conductor was looking at, and then to hear what they must have been doing, right? For example, this last page, you have a chord assigned to each group on stage that the conductor can cue, and they can literally just like with both hands conduct any group they want, and just play with it. And it's just a really fun, playful kind of score. It was as like the string quartet that we looked at. Obviously, the like harmonic language and the pitch language of it is still like kind of modernist and serial almost. Although I wasn't sure exactly what his role was, there seemed to be certain intervallic choices that unified the whole piece, which sort of allowed him to be so loose with all these techniques that deal with temporality and when things occur. And yeah, so this was commissioned by the Denver Symphony Orchestra in fulfillment of a Kusevitsky Foundation commission. So seems like it was performed a year later in 1976, but perhaps like Brown was already interested in writing for orchestra and had already been toying with a lot of this stuff in 1972. And then it was only later when he had this opportunity that he could, he could like put together the whole thing. We have a nice little history of performances here. So yeah, the first performance, Denver Symphony Orchestra. Then it was performed in a month later in Saarbrücken, which is the capital city of Saarland, Germany. So immediately there's a German premiere after that. Then Radio France performs it a year later. Another orchestra with the same conductor performs it again in Saarbrücken in 1981. 1984 is performed again in Saarbrücken with a different conductor. So it seemed to be sort of get into the rotation of the Rundfunk Symphony Orchestra. Got a Strasbourg performance by the same ensemble. Then the New York Phil performs it. This is like almost 10 years after the first premiere. And I guess in the 21st century, we get a couple of premieres by the New World Symphony Orchestra. One in Miami, and then another performance in San Francisco. And 8 years later, it was performed twice in Frankfurt. Yeah, so there's a lot of countries in the world, obviously, where this piece has not been premiered. So you could be the first. Maybe it deserves a Canadian premiere or something like that. In a couple days, we're going to do another Earl Brown piece. So if you liked this one, I'll try to do an even better job of the next one. And then in between that, we got a bunch of stuff. First up is a Ligeti piece. I don't think we've looked at Ligeti since the Chamber Orchestra series. So this will be good. This is a piece that I wasn't too familiar with until my master's. It's called Melodian. It's pretty standard, like Ligeti stuff. Not as iconic or well known as Atmospheres, but sort of like that piece in a lot of ways. We have like several pieces from 1971 in a row. So that'll be interesting.